In studio right now is a fellow that we appreciate and we've been talking to during this campaign. We haven't ignored him, and I think that probably that it had been a little more exciting last night if State Senator Randy Brogdon, former State Senator Brogdon, had been part of that debate. It's kind of a snoozer, okay? And I think maybe the campaigns at the end of the day thought that that's okay. They didn't, trip on their tie. Also want to bring into the mix our good friend, the executive director of the State Democrat Party, Trav Robertson, who has both of his teas. Is that coffee and sweet tea or sweet tea?
Coffee and sweet tea right here.
If you don't know the good gentleman from South Carolina, you've just, now your life is much more enriched to know him.
Good to see you, Trav.
Pleasure to be here, Senator. Good to see you.
Now, Trav Robertson said to me as he was walking in the studio, he says, why did Randy Brogdon not get to participate in the debate? Why don't you tell us in your own words?
Well, according to Channel 9, Channel 6 over in the Tulsa area, I didn't poll high enough. And I just want to remind the listeners on your station that I didn't poll very high when I ran for governor. As a matter of fact, when I announced that I was running for governor, I had a 1.5% name ID statewide. Even though I'd served my district in the state senate for 8 years, I was well known in my Senate district. But around the state, I wasn't well known. And but after I campaigned for the next 19 months, I wound up receiving 40% of the primary vote in a four-way race with Mary Fallon at the time. Now, 2 weeks out before that race, the gubernatorial race took place, there was a poll done by Sooner Poll right here in Oklahoma City.
Our friend Bill Shepard.
That's right.
By the way, every Monday here on KOKC, he's in.
And Bill did that poll. He had me, I think, at 14%. 2 weeks later, I got 40%. He was so far off his numbers about 3 weeks after the election, he called, said, Randy, could I come over to Tulsa and I want to discuss the polls with you. I want to see what happened because you just didn't show up in my poll. And we actually had ourselves at 35% at that time. So let me just tell your listeners, polls are a fickle thing. And Bill Shepard even said on one of the Tulsa stations just about 3 weeks ago, Brogdon supporters don't show up in the way he does his polls. He admitted that on air. And I think Griffin Communication did not do the citizens of Oklahoma, or certainly the Republicans of Oklahoma, a service by keeping me out of that race, because if you wanted to hear the conservative voice for a U.S. Senate seat, you didn't hear it last night, and I agree with you. It was a snoozer.
It was a bit of a snoozer. And I do have to say this, about going to come to defense of my buds over at News 9, the Griffin companies. I really wish that more folks had done what they did last night. I'd love for you to be involved in that, but the fact that just one TV station's done a full-length debate, I do salute them for that. But I do think, Trav, and I think you follow the same sort of line. It's best to have, for voters, it's best to have all of the ideas out there. And I think that based upon what you did in the governor's race a few years ago, that you probably should have been in that room.
And before we go any further, I got to interject something. I've done a lot of radio shows and things throughout the years. This is the first time that I have seen a roll of toilet paper being used as a stand here in studio. I'm very impressed by that.
That's because we've been reporting on all these ads.
I wish we could have television right here so the people can see what I'm talking about.
Extrapolate while there's toilet paper on the panel. You just get your minds wrapped around that one a little bit.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And the reality is that the TV and the airwaves belong to everybody, and it's such a short time span in which you have to get the attention of voters across the state now. Everybody deserves the opportunity to be heard, and in that type of situation, someone who gets 40% in a gubernatorial primary should have been allowed to participate in a debate.
Now, let me get started with both Trav, and we're featuring you, Senator, on this hour, and one of the things that we woke up to is this headline right here, okay? And I'm going to just get your take on this. We'll see how the media rolls on this one. But the headline, and this story is done by Nolan Clay over there at the Oklahoman. Oklahoma County DA inquiry focuses on T.W. Shannon Joy Hoffmeister campaigns, specifically their dealings with the consultant who was running some of these dark money. That's the new phrase, is dark money. It's independent expenditures. Chad Alexander, you know that he was a guy who ran the PAC that was supporting Mr. Shannon. He was arrested. This story confirms that they've got his cell phone and his computer. Okay? The issue is whether or not these organizations and particularly this campaign, if they're coordinating with their PACs, which would be illegal. Do you find it at all interesting, the story number 2? Let me start with you, because the District Attorney Prater is a Democrat.
Correct.
And he's also a guy that's a serious man, okay?
Correct.
A serious man. But do you guys find at all the timing interesting? Do you think that this is campaign-related, or is this just a coincidence that's happening right now? I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I'm just saying, wow, 6 days out, this happens.
Well, I mean, in politics, you say there's no such thing as coincidence. However, the reality is, in that type of situation, it's hard to keep an investigation like that quiet. You know, every person you ask a question to, they tell someone else or something like that. And, you know, the solicitor, the DA, is not someone who takes things like that lightly. As we have seen, he is the go-to solicitor or DA who prosecutes those who've been indicted or guilty of some type of political malfeasance. You know, I went to the Federal Election Commission 2.5 weeks ago to talk to federal election commissioners about the level playing field between these secret groups that don't have to pay report and political parties, because the state Democratic Party, the state Republican Party, we have to jump through all types of hoops and federal regulations when it comes to reporting. These secret organizations don't, and there's not a level playing field, and so you see people funneling money to it. I think if I were those folks who were involved, I would be extremely concerned about what's on that the emails in that computer and the text messages on that phone.
Yeah, you know, and I hadn't seen this headline until I walked in here just a few minutes ago, but this is something I've been concerned about since day one.
Right.
And I have run a grassroots campaign just like I have in all of my races. I'm truly a grassroots guy. I was Tea Party before Tea Party was even cool. I'm just meaning I am truly a man of the people. I believe in limited government. I believe in the expansion of our personal liberty. And when I see special interest money, dark money, whatever you want to call it, pouring into the millions of dollars into two individuals. It's not just Shannon. It's also Langford. He's got tall building crowd. He's got special interest money that's coming into his race as well. I think every Republican primary voter needs to pause just for a minute and ask, why? Why would anybody, why would any corporation, why would any special interest pour millions of dollars in these races? Well, let me answer that question. Because they have a special interest. That's why they're pouring millions of dollars in. They're wanting something in return for that. And I will tell your listeners this morning that all of my donors are up front. They're listed. I am proud of my donors. I would never hide any of them. And when they donate to my campaign, they're hitching their wagon to mine. And we're pulling in the right direction on these liberty issues. And I am very concerned that millions of dollars has been coming in from out of state, from special interest groups for some reason. I don't know exactly what the reason's for, but I guarantee you there's going to be a payback somewhere.
Randy Brogdon, the candidate for United States Senate, the Republican side. Trev Robertson, our good friend over the State Democrat Party, in studio. We've got another 45 minutes to go. And we'll get into these questions that were asked of Congressman Langford and Speaker Shannon as we come back. When we do,
Mike Glover with your news, traffic, and weather today starting at 4 p.m. on News Talk 1520 and FM 103.1 KOKC.
822. If you're not dancing to that Doak song, it just not got any rhythm, okay? I mean, that may be
That's the theme to Footloose, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, it gets you happy feet on with that song right there. Trav Robertson and the executive director of the State Democrat Party. Glad to have you in, man. And every Thursday, Trav is in here, and former Senator Randy Brogdon. We're doing the debate, 12 hours later in terms of getting you involved in this. The centerpiece of the story last night, or this debate last night, was who will be the most conservative person dealing with the budget in Washington. Now, how do you think they did in that regards? And if you take the three of you,
right,
who is going to be the most conservative on the budget in Washington, D.C.?
What a great question. And I believe that the budget, I believe that the deficit is the key that holds our future. Government's just too big right now. It spends too much. It taxes too much. It regulates too much. It snoops on us too much. And we've got to get a control of Congress. We got to get a control of Washington, D.C. And the one thing that I can promise that I will never do is to add $1 to the deficit. Now, James Lankford, he will give you some good excuses of why he thinks that we have to continue to raise the debt so we can get out of debt. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. It makes sense to him when he says it. But I can give you about 17 or 18 trillion reasons why I will never vote to raise that debt limit. It is literally bankrupting our financial future. And it is probably the single most biggest threat to our entire way of life. So for me, I believe if we're going to get out of debt, we have to control spending. Now, even T.W. Shannon, he will tell you that he believes that we need to control the debt. And he says that he's not going to raise the debt. And as Speaker, he fought to raise the debt or create new debt on the state of Oklahoma. Now, the 4 months he was Speaker, that's a true statement. But you know what? Even Shannon ran legislation as a House rep to create debt on the state of Oklahoma to the tune of $25 million to build an Indian museum. Now, we can have the debate whether it's good public policy to use taxpayer money to build an Indian museum or not, but that's not the argument here. He says he is not for that, yet he ran legislation to do it.
Do you think that one of the things that they brought up last night, Kelly and Terry, when they were doing some questions, was one of the questions was, in what case would it be beneficial to allow the government to shut down in order to make changes needed to correct overspending in the government? What do you think? What would your answer be on that one?
You know, I wasn't real anxious when the government was shut down for, 8 or 10 days, whatever that was. I felt rather comfortable during that period of time. I knew that the government wasn't doing anything to me at that moment. The reality is we have a lot of weak knees in Washington, D.C., in Congress. No one will lead on the issues. And until we get a control of our spending, look, politicians crave your money. The one thing that they want is your money. It gives them more power. It makes people dependent upon government. And Obama has been a master at this. But you know what? The Republicans are falling in line. Republicans now are catering to the wants and the desires of their constituents, and they're willing to pretty much just sell the farm and collect that power from the people that they are supposed to serve. We become dependent, and when we're dependent upon government, we lose liberty.
Well, I've got to interject there just a moment, Senator, to the extent that up until President Obama's first year in office, 85% of the debt in this country was accrued under two presidents, Ronald Reagan and George Bush II. Also, you've got to make the point, and it's extremely disingenuous not to make the point, that Barack Obama inherited a situation that we had not seen in America since at least Harry Truman was president. And that was he inherited 2 wars, a recession, without a manner by which to pay for any of it or to work ourselves out of the hole. And so I agree with you that T.W. Shannon and James Lankford both believe in acquiring debt because they've both been part of the problem. But to make this an argument that it's the Democrats' fault and President Obama's fault is somewhat disingenuous when you've got Republicans that control the House of Representatives in Washington.
You're not getting an argument out of me.
I just wanted to clarify.
No, you're not going to get an argument out of me. And I kind of prefaced those remarks. I said the Republicans have done the same thing. And,
right.
And yes, Bush started it. And a lot of Republicans voted for the bailout. A lot of Republicans voted for TARP. Just a complete violation of their sworn constitutional oath not to do those kind of things. And it is a violation of their constitutional oath to strip us of our economic freedom like they did.
827 Mitchell in the morning. Randy Brogdon, State Senator Randy Brogdon, Trav Robertson. We were talking about the debate last night, which Randy Brogdon, according to the stations, didn't meet the sort of threshold. We've talked about why he wasn't in there, and he disagrees with the polling methodology. So we're covering that this morning. Senator, one of the things that was said last night that I found interesting, and Trav, you'll note this is an interesting question and want to get you to weigh in. One of the questions, our latest poll shows 70% of Oklahoma Republicans consider themselves conservative. So there were three parts to this question, Randy. Are you the most conservative candidate in this race? If so, does that make you the Tea Party candidate? And part three was, how can voters be sure?
Yeah, well, they can be sure by looking at our voting record. And I would please invite your listeners to check our voting records out. Let me just tell you about mine real quick, and let me tell you about theirs. Because as I've been on the stump, over the last several months, there's one thing that neither one of those gentlemen will do. They won't tell you about my voting record, and they sure don't tell you about theirs. I have a 93% lifetime conservative vote record here in the state of Oklahoma. T.W. Shannon graded off the exact same index as I am. He has a 74%. James Langford graded off of a different one. He has a 68%. So we have a D average. We have an average of a C, or we could send the A team. I have an A. I have a lifetime of 93%. And I may take that a little bit further. I would even say T.W. Shannon this year has an I. He has an incomplete. He's missed 80% of his votes this last year because he was too busy instead of taking care of business that the people elected him to do. He's out campaigning for an entirely different office. Look, I ran a statewide race. I ran for governor back in 2010. I did not miss one day of work during that time that we were in session. I take my job seriously, and I don't think Representative Shannon has.
All right, we've got more coming up. We got to take a quick break. Trav Robertson, Executive Director of the State Democrat Party, and Senator Randy Brogdon. We're in talking about yesterday's debate, which Randy was not allowed to be in because of the criteria.
Shameful.
But he's here right now. We've got another half hour right here on Mitchell in the Morning. It's 8:30.
Delivering more local news. Politics on the strongest station on the dial. News Talk 1520 at 103.1 KOKC.
8:35, Mitchell in the Morning. State Senator Randy Brogdon, former state senator and candidate for the United States Senate on the Republican side. Trav Robertson, the executive director of the State Democrat Party. Both in. We're talking about last night's debate, which did not include the senator. And we're kind of going over some of these questions. One of them, earlier this morning, we referenced Dandy Don Meredith. And, you know, I know that for folks under about 40 years old, a lot of people don't remember him, you know? Yeah. And he took that old Willie Nelson song. I loved it. On Monday Night Football when I was a kid, you know, when the game was over with, there's a Packer guy, by the way, that he goes, "There's your dagger." Okay, when the Packers have put the game away, "There's your dagger." But Dandy Don would sing "Turn Out the Lights."
Sing it.
Yeah, turn out the lights, the party's over. Okay, you knew that was time to get up and go to bed. Okay, game is over with. Well, a lot of people don't know who Don Meredith is. And a lot of it just comes to, you know, my wife goes, "You're so old. You reference movies nobody's seen in 50 years." But that segues to this. Last night, the last question, Senator, that was asked was, a vital quality needed for serving in Washington is having life experience and perspective outside the professional political bubble. That, by the way, this was asked by Senator Coburn, right, but they had videotaped earlier. Political bubble, by which to make the hard decisions facing our nation. What in your background and life experience gives you that kind of perspective? Interesting answer. What is your answer?
Yeah, and I thought that was a good question, and I thought both of the answers were extraordinarily weak because they don't have the life experiences that I think what the average Oklahoman is looking for. First of all, I truly had a business career. I had 30 years building my own company. You know, back in 1971, as a senior in high school, I loaned my dad $500 and my 1963 Chevy so Dad could start our little fledgling family air conditioning company, and we built that into a great business. I was able to live the American dream for the last 30-plus years. Building my own company, providing jobs for many, many families that worked for us throughout that period of time. I've also served on the Owasso City Council. I served as mayor of Owasso starting back in 1999. So about 15 years ago, my focus shifted from the business world to public service. Then I went on to serve in the Oklahoma State Senate. And the 8 years that I was there, I passed some major reform legislation. And let me just run down the litany without giving you the background of everything. But when I talk about lower taxes and efficient government and private property protection, I wrote things like the Taxpayer Bill of Rights that limited how fast government could grow from one year to the next. I wrote the Taxpayer Transparency Act, where we can all go on the website now and watch the spending habits of politicians here in Oklahoma City at the state capitol. In order to protect your property rights, I wrote legislation to stop dead in its tracks the NAFTA superhighway from confiscating 37,000 acres of private property. In order to protect our personal identity, I wrote legislation to nullify, to opt out, to kill the unconstitutional Real ID Act of 2005. And Trav, one of the most liberal Democrats in the state Senate was my co-author on that piece of legislation. Because whether you're Republican or Democrat, most of us want to maintain our private identity without the government coming in and snooping on us, like Representative Langford allowed last year with his no vote to stop the NSA from snooping and reading our emails. For a more efficient government, I wrote legislation for term limits for statewide elected officials. Gone are the days when a Republican or a Democrat can seize control of a state office and be there for, 12, 15, 18, 20 years. Those days are over. So I don't just talk about these things. I have prepared myself over the last decade of my life to serve in this U.S. Senate seat.
It's 8:40 minutes in the morning. Right now we have our former Senator Randy Brogdon, candidate for United States Senate, Trav Robertson, Executive Director of the Democrat Party. Let me toss this out to both of you. Okay. One of the things that was, when that question was asked, both of them talked about their backgrounds. One was James Langford was very forthright. He said 22 years as a teacher, a minister, working with kids. And Speaker Shannon says, well, for 10 years I've run a business. I've made a payroll. Both of you, your take in terms of how important that is and the answers that they both gave.
Well, I think right now you've touched on something that we're losing in America and in Oklahoma. And that is, I disagree with you a little bit on term limits. I think that it is in part an excuse for people who don't participate. But I think that what you have when you've got a system such as term limits, and I understand the rationality, and I think the majority of Oklahomans support it, but what you have is you have young people in their early 30s who've never paid taxes, who don't have a mortgage, who've not run a business, who don't have some of the life's experiences passing laws, and they don't know the effect of the laws that they're passing. And I think that right now in Oklahoma, you've got two economies. You've got an economy of those who are in the energy industry, and they're doing quite well. And then you've got those who are fighting to live every day on lower wages and they're struggling. And you don't have a legislative body and elected officials that understand that. But, I'd like to know exactly what Speaker Shannon's 10 years of experience is. I'd like to know exactly what he did in his business. Representative Langford was a little more succinct in telling us that he was a minister. We all know that he worked at a church camp as well. But I think that there are some life experiences missing. You learn stuff, Senator, being an air conditioning repairman and the owner of an air conditioning business.
Right. Well, and, I witnessed firsthand and experienced firsthand the overreach of the federal government into my business. Also, the overreach of the state into my business. Government, like I said in my opening remarks, is just too stinking big. It needs to get out of the way, let the marketplace drive this economy. And as you guys listened to that debate last night, and I'm talking to the listeners now too, you saw a remarkable distinction between what I'm talking about today and what they talked about. James Langford had a federal solution to every federal problem. Did you notice that? Whether it was health care, he had some health care thing that he wanted to pass that he's working on, and he's already got this in committee. Look, if we're going to solve the health care problem, you put the doctor and the patient back in touch with each other. We don't need government at the state level like Langford wanted, and even TW said. We could do some state things here in Oklahoma.
Well, let me ask you a question, Senator. The fact of the matter is, in the state of Oklahoma, you've got a significant number of individuals who cannot afford health care, who did not have the ability to afford health care. You've got Mary Fallon and T.W. Shannon, who have both refused the Medicaid expansion in this country. What's your solution to rural hospitals in the state of Oklahoma that are going to be, who are forced to treat patients because of a Republican president, Ronald Reagan? What are you going to do to those hospitals in rural Oklahoma that are not going to survive because of a law that Ronald Reagan passed?
Let's get back to where we should be, and we're not anywhere close to where we should be. I remember back as a little kid, Dr. Short would come to our home,
right,
carrying his little Marcus Welby bag and give all those kids a penicillin shot. And that was before there was a Marcus Welby.
Right.
And he would charge mom and dad maybe $5 or $10. I don't know. Maybe mom would make him a dinner in exchange for that. But it's been the advent of government interference that has just stripped us of the marketplace assurances that we could have better health care.
Is it government interference or capitalism? Because I believe that Marcus Welby and house calls went away as the cost of health care escalated and doctors realized they could actually make a significant profit.
No, the cost went out of sight when government put specific mandates in the healthcare industry, and then the insurance companies are forced to provide something that they can't afford to provide, so they've got to increase their costs. So if we're going to secure the healthcare industry, we got to bring the marketplace back to the forefront.
And I just remember Marcus Welby, when he showed up, he had Barbara Streisand's husband with him. And
he sure did.
And the other under 30 crowd, who's Marcus Welby and who's Barbara Streisand's husband?
Don Meredith.
All right, we'll see him turn out the lights in 15 minutes. We've got another segment to go.
Can I sing?
Mitchell, yeah, you bet.
I've never sang on the radio. I want to sing.
All right, we'll be right back. It's 8:45.
We'll be your backup singers.
Instant information and stimulating talk. News Talk 1520 at 103.1 KOKC, the home of Mitchell in the Morning.
Former State Senator Randy Brogdon, running for the United States Senate, was not in that debate last night, but he's here all by himself this morning. Trav Robertson from the State Democrat Party, our regular here on Thursday on Mitchell in the Morning. Let's go through some of these other questions, rapid fire style. Obamacare.
Yeah, Obamacare.
What do we do about it? Well, repeal. It's the law. Some people are writing it's the law. We just need to make life better with that in the statutes. What do you say?
Here's the difference between me and the other candidates. Repeal. Period. End of story. Not replace. Langford wants to replace. Shannon has actually changed his view on this in the last 3 weeks. He was repeal and replace. Last night he said repeal. So I'm glad he's listening to my debate.
And this is something that is necessary for the people of this country and this state. We've got to have candidates who don't just say they're pro-life when in reality they're pro-birth, because once people are born, the Republicans don't care about them. The fact is this is something to help people take care of themselves and their family.
So you're going to go work for repeal?
Repeal,
Senator.
Totally.
Bo Bergdahl, the dispute or the controversy about trading the 5 Al-Qaeda boys who were, just terminally ugly men. I don't know how you find 5 guys any uglier on the planet for this Bo Bergdahl. Senator, if the president had asked for Senate approval of this, would you have voted to give him approval to make this trade?
No, of course not. This has put the lives of Americans in danger all across the world now. You know, we have our nose stuck in places all over the world, and now a lot of them are at risk because of this president's actions. We never deal with the terrorist.
I never in my lifetime thought I would ever see Republicans criticize saving an American soldier on the field. The fact of the matter is that it's a double standard. When Republicans criticize an American soldier, it's done in the name of liberty and American. If a Democrat were to do it, they're unpatriotic. And if you don't believe me, ask Max Cleland, who lost both legs and an arm in Vietnam, and he voted against the Patriot Act, the very act that Republicans say is overreaching, and they ran commercials calling him unpatriotic. The fact of the matter is The creed is no soldier left behind, and that's exactly what this president did.
Well, I agree with no soldier left behind, but there's other ways to get that soldier. I mean, we have a black ops that could have taken care of that. They knew where he was, and they could have gone in and taken care of that. You don't trade 5 bad guys. You cannot deal with terrorists because they're not worthy dealers.
But I think the reality is that people like me and you, Senator, we don't have all of the intel in this situation, and we don't know the facts. That's just a simple case of not knowing the facts.
Yeah, and I think, are you for an investigation, by the way, into this? Do you think, first of all, the president broke the law by not letting Congress know?
Well, it's obviously broke the law. I mean, the law is only 30 days old, and yes, he broke it. So Congress just passed a notification law just a couple of months ago. So, yeah, he broke the law.
Let me get into
he should be held accountable.
Something. Trevor, I know you want to weigh in on this. This question specifically, getting down to the short hairs there at about 8:44 or 8:54 rather for Mitchell in the morning. But here is the one that I want to finish up on, okay? You have both, this is Terry or Kelly asking both the gentlemen last night in the debate, you've both gone on record as being opposed to a hike in the minimum wage. Let me start with, are you opposed to a hike in the minimum wage?
Of course, yeah.
So, in fact, they said, Mr. Shannon, you've been quoted as saying we should do away with it altogether. And then the question came, how do you feel about other government-mandated regulations for workers, such as overtime pay, workplace safety, and laws to protect young workers? Should all of these issues also be left to the free market? Senator, what would your answer be?
Certainly, the free market. And, the state doesn't even need to be involved with this. I think Shannon even said it'd be okay for the state to have a minimum wage. But let me tell you, I spent 30 years building my companies, and I paid my employees what they were worth. And some of my employees were worth a lot more than the other ones, and they were paid accordingly to how much money they could make me. So when you let government dictate to industry, to business, what someone is worth, I assure you they have a different idea and they'll put a different value on it than what I would. So government just needs to be out of it. Let the free market rule.
And I think, first and foremost, that's one of the differences between Senator Brogdon and the other two candidates last night is that he's actually met a payroll, started a company, and had to make those decisions. But once again, I think it's the extreme hypocrisy of the federal government and those Republicans who are seeking federal office to the extent that they don't want federal overreach unless it's something that they believe in. And the reality is that those laws,
Good point.
Those laws are specifically designed to protect the most important asset any company has, and that's its employees.
Trav, and that is a good point. So let me make another distinction. I don't want federal overreach in anything, in any part of my life, even if it's something I support. If it's not in the enumerated powers, Article 1, Section 8, the very defined, limited powers that we, the people, gave the feds, they should not be participating in. Let me put this in perspective. We talk about the budget and how it's destroying our economy right now, this deficit spending. If we had a constitutional budget, only took care of the things in Article 1, Section 8, the clearly defined things of the federal government, we would have a total budget in this country of about $800 billion instead of $4.5 trillion, and we're going to borrow about $800 billion of that this year. It's just ridiculous. Government overreach is destroying us.
Let me end up. We got about 4 minutes to go. And
I want to take time to sing. Don't forget that.
I understand what you do. We'll cue up that dope song. We'll all sing along together with that. I want to know, you're from the Tulsa area, which my wife thinks the most beautiful place on earth is Tulsa. She grew up there in Broken Arrow. But the thing is, when I hear libertarian ideas interjected, I start to see Democrat, Republican become more blurred whenever you're talking about liberty issues. And I hear it from both sides. Are we going to see these polarized parties in the future? Or are we starting to see the undoing of the straight orthodoxy Democrat-Republican?
Well, the problem is the Republicans have fallen off of the conservative wagon, and the Democrats have fallen off the liberal wagon. And here's what I mean by that. I had a conversation with a liberal Democrat just here a while back, and I said, what are you doing? You are no longer protecting the civil rights that you guys fought for. And if you're waiting on the Republicans to do that, you're going to be waiting a long time. But the Real ID Act, for example, that is such an intrusion of our personal Fourth Amendment rights. And the Democrats used to be strong on those issues. And
we still are.
Well, no, you're not either. You're nothing like you used to be. You're letting it go because of who's in office. Since you're in charge, you're letting those things go. And the Republicans
Republicans control the United States House of Representatives. Remember that.
The point I'm trying to make is the Republicans and the Democrats alike are stepping back from what they truly believe. You know, there's nothing like a real liberal explaining their views. There's nothing like a real conservative explaining their views. It's when you get in that middle mush that you can't discern what they truly believe. I believe in limited government and the expansion of liberty.
Well, I think that's a pretty good way to end.
Turn out the lights. The party's over. I've always wanted to do that. I also always want to give a weather report. It's cloudy. It's rainy. It's
you put your cheaters on there.
There you go. Here we go.
Today there's a 40% chance of thunderstorms. It's hot with a high of 89 degrees. I'm assuming we're going to have a lot of humidity. Tonight a low of 73. Friday a 60% chance of storms, high of 88. Golf is off the table for the next couple of days. Saturday, partly cloudy with a 20% chance of showers, high of 92 degrees. Sunday, beautiful, high of 92. Get out, enjoy the golf course on Sunday. Vote Tuesday. Vote Brogdon, June 24th.
And where do you find your website and information on
RandyBrogdon.com. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook for everyone that's under 30 years old. And for all the blue hairs, you can just give me a call.
That's right. And Trev, thanks so much for being in, buddy.
It's good to be here. Glad to play the Democratic opposition, Senator.
Did a great job. You both did a great job, and we'll be back here tomorrow. Tomorrow's tailgate, Kyle Lovelace, Mr. Gaddy. And we'll have some more surprises. We're talking about Jazz in June.